Okay, hello everyone, and welcome back to Common English Mistakes. Don't just learn, improve. So recently, I saw this video, which, as we're going to see, is complete rubbish. So today I want to talk about videos like these, where they say, don't say this very common and therefore natural phrase or words, say something else. I'd say at best this isn't natural because they're teaching you to do something different to what a native speaker does. And at worst, a lot of these have the wrong context, are used in the wrong situation, or even the wrong meaning. Having said that, there is some useful language there. So we'll look at when you should use these to sound natural. So let's look at the first video, sound like a pro in English.
Sound like a pro in English. Don't say but, say however.
Okay, so like I said, this is complete rubbish. To show simple contrast in spoken language, normal conversation, generally you want to be using but. This is what native speakers say the vast majority of the time. It's a short, simple word to use, just like in other languages. So, myself, I like living in Lisbon, my city, but it's expensive. Even in a more formal situation, speaking to your boss, there are still reports to do, but we should finish them by the end of the week, or a discussion. I don't think electric vehicles are the best option right now, but they might be in the future. My previous job was actually all spoken language, conversation, and lessons. And when I had to teach, however, it was actually quite difficult to find contexts where it would be appropriate. It's a bit more formal. You're going to pause before you say it, and it's going to add emphasis. So it's more appropriate to use in discussions or debates. So for the first two, it doesn't really make sense to use however, but you could say, I don't think electric vehicles are the best option now. However, they might be in the future. Where it is useful is with writing. Not just because but is a little bit more informal, but because however begins a new sentence, therefore helps to break up your sentences, separate your ideas, and make your writing easier to understand. So you can say something like, smartphones have changed the way we interact, making tasks in our daily lives easier. However, they can also have a negative impact on people due to their addictive nature. Very useful, good writing to show contrast and separate your ideas clearly. However, in normal conversation, don't say however, just say but. That's the natural thing to say. Anyway, next video.
Sound like a pro in English. Don't say very simple, say basic.
Okay, so the problem here is, although these words are similar, they don't have exactly the same meaning, and we can't always use them interchangeably. Simple means not difficult, complicated, easy to understand. So the instructor gave us some simple instructions. In this situation, you could also say basic, but this means not complicated and a starting point, the lowest level of something. So you can talk about a basic level of a language, and I often do say things like, I have a basic level of Spanish. You can talk about accommodation being basic. On my hikes, I often stay in basic accommodation. There's just a bed and a table. But in these sentences, it would be wrong to say simple because it's not talking about easy to understand. Similarly, in Portugal, you have to do a tax return, but it's quite simple. It's quite easy to understand. And again, here we can't use basic because you're not talking about a starting point or the lowest level. Be careful with videos like these because if you're going to learn a word, you need to know the definition properly, some context, see some example sentences to make sure you're using it accurately. So next up is a very big YouTuber telling us not to use the phrase "I think."
Today I am going to give you 21 advanced alternatives for I think. I think that I think is very boring, overused, and it's just repetitive. In debates, in English classes, in conversation, we are always asked to give our opinion. And more often than not, I hear my students saying, I think, blah, 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 blah. I think, blah, 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 blah. I don't think, blah, 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 blah.
So she says, I think is repetitive, maybe, and that in discussion, conversation, this is what you mostly hear. But where she's wrong is, it's not just her students, this is everyone who speaks English in the real world. This is what we use most of the time. I'm learning Portuguese, and the equivalent, acho que, this is what I hear. Acho que, blah, 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 blah. Acho que, blah, 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 blah. Not just in classes, but in Portugal. I just don't understand why these people are teaching you to do something massively different from what native speakers do. It's not overused, it's not boring, well, maybe it is boring, but this is what native speakers do, and this is what you should be doing too. Having said that, she does have some quite interesting language to use in more specific situations. So let's have a look. The first phrase, as far as I can tell.
Number 5 is as far as I can tell. As far as I can tell. These past two have been fairly neutral, neither informal nor formal, as far as I can tell. An example? As far as I can tell, the bride wasn't really expecting me. As far as I can tell, the bride wasn't really expecting me.
So she's kind of missing the key meaning and usage of this phrase. You're going to use this to say what you think, but when it's based on incomplete information or knowledge. For example, someone asks you, how's Steve doing these days? You go, yeah, and as far as I can tell, he's enjoying living in Barcelona. I've seen maybe some Instagram photos or someone's told me this, but I don't know for sure because I'm not there living with him. A bit more formal, someone asks you, when will the new metro line be complete? And you say, well, as far as I can tell, sometime in 2025. Again, this is what maybe you've heard or read, but if you're not working on the project, you don't know for sure. With her example, this kind of sounds a bit funny, to be honest. The most natural thing to say in that situation would be, I don't think the bride was really expecting me. Again, maybe boring, but that's the natural phrase to use. As far as I can tell, much more specific. Next one, as far as I'm concerned.
Number 7, again, slightly more formal. As far as I'm concerned. As far as I'm concerned. An example? As far as I'm concerned, she totally overreacted and shouldn't have cried. As far as I'm concerned, she totally overreacted and shouldn't have cried. Again, more info on.
Okay, so I mean, this would be a natural thing to say, I guess, in that situation. But again, we need a bit more explanation of when you're going to use this. We use this when we give our perspective or what we think, but when it's not necessarily shared by others, it's not necessarily what other people think. For example, as far as I'm concerned, pineapple doesn't belong on pizza, but I recognize that other people feel differently. Also, we often use this to be quite firm in our opinion. So for example, you say, look, as far as I'm concerned, this is a bad idea. You're clearly stating what your opinion is. She's kind of done both of those there and combined them together. It's a useful phrase, but again, we're going to use it in stronger situations. You wouldn't say something like, as far as I'm concerned, that was a good movie. You just say, I think that was a good movie. Anyway, final chunk of language, I would say, or I'd say.
Number 12 is I would say, or shortened down to I'd say, I'd say. An example, I'd say the food was very good, but it was a shame I had to share it with my neighbour. I'd say the food was very good, but it was a shame I had to share it with my neighbour.
Okay, this is actually very good language, very natural, and something native speakers say a lot. And the reason it's more natural is it's shorter, more simple, more functional. These are the phrases you want to be using most of the time if you want to sound natural. At the moment, I'm prepping my students for Speaking Part 3, Cambridge First Exam, and this is one of the things I'm encouraging them to use. Our example's a little bit funny, but yeah, it's very natural to say, I'd say the food in that restaurant is very, very good. Again, if you don't have all the information, you could use I'd guess or I'd imagine. For example, I'd imagine that you're very busy this time of year. Or, I don't know exactly when the concert begins, I guess around 9:30. All of those three, very, very natural, would encourage you to use them. Anyway, overall, there's lots of good phrases, language in that video, but still, you want to be using I think, I don't think most of the time, because that's what native speakers do. Learn these other phrases, which are good to use, but use them in specific situations or when you want to be a bit stronger with your language. Most of the time, I think is fine. Okay, final video. We're going to watch someone say not to use the question, how are you?
Once. So we're gonna start first with how are you? Okay, let's go. Hey, how you doing? Hey, what's happening? Or what's going on? My favorite one. Hey, how's everything? How's everything? Or how's it going? Or how are things going? Or how are things? And everyone uses this one. What's up? Or what's new? Hey, you're right. How have you been? What are you up to? My favorite one. Hey, howdy. And what's new with you? And the cool ones. All right, this one that I'm using almost every day with my friends. What's good in the hood, brah?
Okay, first thing to say is there is some really good language in there, very natural phrases and questions you can say when you see someone. However, although we don't use how are you always literally to ask about someone's emotional state, a lot of those questions don't mean how are you. So just pause the video, go through the list and think which ones could you respond to with, yeah, good, thanks. And well done. If you said when you want to ask how someone is, all of those ones there are the questions you need. The others, you're more asking about their life and what they're doing. To be honest, all of those we just use sort of generally socially when we see someone. But again, if you want to ask how someone is, choose some of those phrases there. So just make a little point here. I use some, but not all of these phrases. I say, how are things? How's it going? What's happening? What's up? Those sort of in more informal situations with my friends rather than my parents or relatives. But I still use how are you? And this is what I think you want to do as well. They say every person on earth has a unique idiolect, the particular way someone speaks a certain language, English or your native language. So what I would say is, don't use all of these phrases. Choose the ones you like, the ones which seem natural, you feel comfortable saying. Those make up your idiolect. But how are you is still a very natural question, which native speakers say. You still want to use it too. So overall, each of these videos has similar problems. Firstly, they're telling you not to use by far the most common and therefore the most natural phrase or word. And secondly, they're an oversimplification. All of those phrases, bits of language they teach, are correct, but there are more specific situations you would use them in. So make sure if you're going to learn phrases, or if someone tells you something, you do your research, study it, and learn how to use it properly. But most of the time, you should be saying, but, I think, and how are you? Because that's what native speakers do. Anyway, I hope that was useful for you. This has been me mostly criticizing people who are a lot more successful than I am, but I do think it's a fair point. Those videos are teaching students to do things which are a bit unnatural, even if there is some good language in there. Be careful when you listen to people, watch videos online, including myself. You guys do ask questions all the time, because you're going to get their interpretation. And I also think on YouTube, there's a tendency to say something different to get clicks. Most of the time, you just want to be saying the normal, boring things which native speakers do. Other than that, I'll see you for another video next week. So until next time, see ya.